What if I told you that many arguments at work, every jab, every offhand remark, every passive-aggressive swipe, quietly drain more focus than you realize? Research shows workplace confrontations can trigger major drops in productivity, sometimes cutting output by a third after serious incidents. But here's the surprising part. Those same moments can be turned into momentum for your career if you know how to respond. Most people shut down, replay the moment for hours, and lose energy they'll never get back. I'll show you 3 quick responses you can use right away, plus one system that ensures these moments stop stealing your time. And it usually starts small. You're in a meeting, sharing an idea you've prepared for days, when someone cuts you off with a dismissive, "We already tried that." Why confrontation costs you more than you think? Confrontation takes a bigger toll than most people realize. It may seem like a single moment that passes quickly, but your brain and body don't process it that way. When someone mocks you or shuts you down, your threat response system activates almost instantly. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, and your focus narrows as if you were under actual physical threat. This survival wiring was designed for quick bursts of danger, not for workplace comments, so the chemicals fade but the mental residue lingers. Even after the moment is over, you're left carrying a weight that pulls energy from everything else you do. What happens next is just as important. Instead of letting the incident end, most people replay it in their minds for hours. This isn't harmless reflection, it's rumination, and it steals attention away from the tasks that need it. You find yourself running through what you should have said, imagining different endings, or even constructing entire arguments in your head while you're supposed to be working. Psychologists point out that this repeated rehearsal of negativity doesn't just burn through focus, it gradually erodes self-confidence. A large body of workplace research, including meta-analyses, shows that aggression in the office triggers negative emotion, decreases motivation, and chips away at the willingness to contribute. The insult may have lasted seconds, but the hidden costs stretch out long afterward. Industry and academic reports both confirm how widespread this problem really is. Surveys consistently show that a majority of employees, sometimes as high as 70 or 80%, have experienced or witnessed verbal aggression on the job. And while not every remark leads to catastrophe, the impact is measurable when the behavior is frequent or severe. In fact, one post-incident analysis shows that after serious workplace aggression or violence, productivity can drop by roughly a third for months. That's not just individual performance either. Those numbers scale to company-wide costs that reach into hundreds of billions annually. The reminder here is that conflict doesn't just sting. It cascades into lost focus, reduced output, and long-term disengagement. What makes this loss so destructive is that it's almost invisible. You still sit at your desk. You still type emails and attend meetings. But the quality has shifted. You second-guess your words, you hesitate to speak up, and you withdraw ideas you once would have contributed. Outwardly, it may not look like much has changed, but inside, you've surrendered time and mental energy that won't be recovered. The real danger isn't the jab itself, it's the way it quietly trains you to hold back in the future. Over months, that withdrawal compounds into diminished confidence, lost opportunities, and stalled growth. So when people brush off workplace conflict as just words, they miss the real cost. Insults pass quickly, but the drain on focus, motivation, and self-belief lasts much longer. And that lingering weight is what quietly undermines entire careers. The next challenge, though, is not just understanding why confrontation is costly, it's recognizing why most of our default reactions don't solve it. Because the truth is, when we're caught in the moment, the ways we usually respond are more likely to feed the problem than fix it. And that's where things get even trickier. The 3 popular but dangerous responses. Most of us don't have a perfect response ready when someone lands a jab in a meeting or a casual conversation. We tend to fall back on one of 3 common reactions that feel protective in the moment, but actually leave lasting damage. The fake laugh, the overexplainer routine, or falling completely silent. Each seems small at the time, yet each gives away more ground than the insult itself. The first is the fake laugh. Someone makes a comment that clearly stings, and instead of disagreeing or even pausing, you chuckle along as though you're in on the joke. That laugh isn't real, it's a shield, meant to show that you're easygoing and not hurt. but what it actually signals is agreement. You've helped legitimize their jab, while they gain a little social reward for putting you down. Later, when you're by yourself, the sting cuts deeper because you know you co-signed their moment of disrespect. Micro takeaway: a pause beats a laugh. The second response is overexplaining. You hear a critique, and before you even think, you launch into a long-winded defense. Well, if you considered the full numbers, or that deadline issue wasn't mine, there were all these other factors. You intend to salvage credibility, but the cascade of details makes you look smaller, not stronger. The aggressor doesn't need to press further. Your defensive flood of words does the work for them. Your colleagues don't retain your evidence. They register that you felt pressured enough to justify yourself in public. And the aggressor learns something useful, that just one quick jab can unravel your composure. Micro takeaway: a short answer beats a long defense. The third response is silence. At first glance, staying quiet might appear controlled, even wise. You lower your gaze, let the tension breathe, and wait for the subject to move on. But silence in this context doesn't feel strong. It feels like surrender, both to others and to yourself. To the aggressor, it reads as permission. To the room, it suggests you won't push back. And to your own sense of self, it plants the message that you'll absorb the hit privately and live with it. Later, that silence transforms into hours of self-recrimination, with the words you wish you'd spoken replaying on a loop. Micro takeaway: calm words usually cut regret more than silence does. Sometimes people try to break these patterns by forcing a sharp comeback. But without preparation, those moments tend to misfire. Composite example: an employee, stung by a manager's sarcastic remark, blurts out a shaky retort. Instead of sounding confident, their quip lands unevenly. The room shifts, colleagues look uncomfortable, and the aggressor picks up on their nervousness. The intent was to level the playing field, but the outcome only highlighted simmering frustration. That's the risk of swinging for cleverness on the fly. It often backfires and solidifies the power imbalance. Research on workplace dynamics has noted that these types of unhelpful responses, laughing it off, over-explaining, retreating into silence, or fumbling through a comeback, do not protect targets. In fact, they make it more likely that similar behavior will recur, because they serve as reinforcement for the aggressor. Some surveys also suggest that colleagues who occasionally push back, even in small measured ways, tend to receive fewer negative remarks later. The difference comes down to whether your reaction communicates acceptance or boundary. The cost isn't just in the moment. An overlooked factor here is the audience. Even if only a few colleagues are present, they're observing not just the jab, but also your response. Their impression of you forms around what they see: the nervous laugh, the defensive speech, the heavy silence, or the clumsy retort. Consciously or not, that response colors how much weight they give to your ideas. If what they see is you shrinking, their respect doesn't increase, and in many cases, it declines quietly. You may not notice it immediately, but the impact can build over time. That's why these responses are deceptively dangerous. They don't resolve the situation, they sustain it. They don't defend your credibility, they chip at it. And rather than protecting your focus, they drain it further by fueling the endless replay loop afterward. With each repetition, you reinforce the cycle for yourself and train others to expect that you'll absorb the next jab as well. Noticing this cycle is the first simple step. Recognizing that the laugh, the over-explaining, the silence, or the shaky retort aren't defenses, but reinforcements helps break the illusion of safety they provide. They cost more than they protect, and the longer they remain your defaults, the deeper their influence on your confidence and presence at work. The shift comes when you start to redirect those reflexes into alternatives that give you control without escalating tension. Once you stop spending energy on the patterns that weaken you, you open the space to practice something different. In the next stage, we'll introduce 3 frameworks: pause, curiosity, and reframe, that replace those old defaults with tools that neutralize tension and rebuild credibility. Before we get there, though, we need to understand the deeper reason these unhelpful reactions cut so deeply. They don't just steal productivity in the short term, they quietly shape the opportunities you allow yourself to pursue. And that loss goes much further than a single meeting or awkward encounter. The true cost: career opportunities lost. Opportunities at work don't just disappear on their own, they're often declined quietly, long before anyone else notices. Picture a composite example. An employee is invited onto a cross-department project that could spotlight their skills with senior leaders. On paper, it's exactly the kind of chance that builds visibility and influence. But when they see a familiar colleague on the roster, the same one who has cut them down in past meetings, their chest tightens. Almost immediately, their mind goes to reasons to step aside. Too much workload, not the right fit, someone else would be better. On the surface, it looks like a simple scheduling choice. Beneath the surface, it is hesitation rooted in the fear of another conflict. This pattern plays out often, and it's rarely about lack of talent. Many people hold back from big opportunities not because they doubt their skill, but because they want to avoid the possibility of tension. That instinct to protect yourself ends up quietly defining a career path. You drift toward projects that feel controlled and safe, but by doing so, you trim away the high visibility chances that actually lead to growth. It's a slower, less dramatic loss than a public insult, but the cost accumulates far more heavily. As the retreats add up, the impact becomes more visible to others than you realize. Colleagues and managers don't just watch who delivers quality work, they also notice who chooses to participate, who puts themselves forward, and who holds steady under pressure. When someone consistently steps back or avoids direct engagement, the perception forms that they are not ready to lead. Leadership potential is often judged not only by performance, but by presence, and presence is tested most when disagreement or tension surfaces. Those who hesitate in those moments may be perceived as reliable contributors, but not as people fit for bigger influence. Research reinforces this perception gap. Studies from the American Management Association show that individuals who avoid conflict tend to be rated as less influential leaders, no matter how strong their technical abilities are. A Journal of Applied Psychology meta-analysis found similar results across thousands of employees. Workplace aggression doesn't just cause stress. It lowers task performance and reduces extra-role contributions that managers often reward. In short, when you don't handle confrontation, others begin to assume you cannot handle leadership. That assumption spreads quietly but powerfully through promotion decisions. The ripple effects become striking when you compare two equally capable people. Imagine one professional who continues to share their ideas in meetings, even when disagreements arise, calmly redirecting the conversation back to their point without being thrown off. Imagine another who contributes valuable work behind the scenes, but opts out of visible opportunities when known aggressors are involved. Over time, the first is remembered as someone who can navigate pressure in real time. The second is remembered as someone who prefers not to risk being challenged. When managers must decide who is ready for the next leadership role, the choice tilts toward the person who has shown composure under fire, even if both have an impressive record on paper. The danger is that avoidance doesn't stay confined to single incidents. It shapes bigger career decisions without announcing itself. You may decline a big presentation because of who sits in the audience. You may avoid applying for a management role because you imagine the pressure of handling competing teams. Slowly, the assumption that exposure leads to pain shifts your choices, carving out an entirely different trajectory. And while each choice feels small, together they add up to what feels like a ceiling you cannot break. At an organizational level, the cost is not minor. According to post-incident reports, nearly 59% of employees leave their organization within a year after experiencing violent or severe workplace aggression. That statistic speaks to the intensity of the ripple effect. Even when people stay, many shrink away from ambition. Both outcomes cut into an organization's pipeline of future leaders. For the individual, whether you leave or stay, the result is the same. Lost time, lost visibility, and lost momentum. Here's what often gets overlooked. Avoidance affects not only your future path, but also the way opportunities are distributed in the present. Decision-makers gravitate toward employees who appear ready to manage confrontation because conflict is built into leadership. Managers don't just look for strong performers, they look for people who project resilience when tested. If every time a tough colleague is involved, your instinct is to sit back, you're quietly signaling that you don't want to expand your influence. That signal can stick with you far longer than the insult itself. It doesn't take an outright bully to cause this, either. Even repetitive microaggressions, A condescending tone, a pattern of interruptions, a dismissive joke can accumulate into patterns of retreat. Over months and years, what began as self-protection solidifies into a career identity where you stick to technical expertise behind the scenes and avoid the rooms where decisions are actually made. And while you may rationalize it as choosing a better fit, much of it stems from a reluctance to face confrontation head-on. None of this is inevitable. Research from organizational behavior studies has shown that those who occasionally push back, without hostility, just clear boundary setting, receive about 37% fewer negative remarks over time. That means standing your ground not only reshapes immediate interactions, it also reshapes how others treat you in the future. Each time you respond with calm clarity, you build a track record that says you can hold influence under pressure. That track record is what colleagues and managers remember when bigger opportunities appear. To make this practical, use a simple prompt. If you're offered a high-visibility opportunity and your hesitation stems from a colleague who undermined you before, flag the project as a time to plan instead of decline. Rehearse your responses, prepare a reset phrase, or schedule a pre-meeting alignment with someone on your side. The key is not to let avoidance become the default. Each time you choose visibility over silence, you widen your career path rather than narrowing it. This is the true cost of mishandled confrontation. It doesn't just drain your focus in the moment, it rewrites the choices you make about your future. Every avoided project, every declined chance, creates a gap between the work you are capable of and the work you are remembered for. The problem is not your quality of ideas, it's the missed visibility to demonstrate them under tension. And as those omissions build, they quietly shape whether you are seen as a peer or as a leader. Most people never calculate this loss because it doesn't come with a single dramatic consequence. It arrives in the form of slower growth, passed-over promotions, and an invisible ceiling that feels like it appeared out of nowhere. But if you trace it back, the limit nearly always began with the same pattern: retreating from confrontation rather than learning to manage it. This is why understanding the true cost matters. Once you see that every missed response does more than sting, it narrows the road ahead, you also see why developing a different approach is so crucial. And while everything so far has treated confrontation as a drain or a threat, what comes next is a shift that changes the whole equation. The productivity reframe, your secret advantage. Here's where things turn practical. This is the productivity reframe, your secret advantage. The idea is simple but powerful. Conflict doesn't have to drain you. It can actually sharpen your focus. The surge you feel when someone challenges you, the tightness in your chest, the racing pulse, the sudden clarity, is your body priming you to act. That rush of adrenaline isn't the enemy. It's energy you can put to work. The mistake most people make is letting it spiral inward into rumination. The opportunity lies in aiming it outward, turning that spike of tension into usable momentum. Think of it as flipping a switch. Conflict floods your system with alertness. If you don't harness it, it eats at your concentration. But if you redirect it, you transform that same physiological spike into productivity fuel. Research on reframing shows that when people reinterpret triggering events, seeing them as challenges rather than threats, they not only experience less emotional fallout, but they often perform better in the tasks that follow. Organizations that train resilience skills have reported measurable benefits too, with some workplace programs finding reductions of around 30% in burnout rates as employees learn to adapt under pressure. The point is clear. What feels destabilizing in the moment can, when reframed, become an asset. To see how it works in action, imagine a composite example drawn from many professionals' experiences. A manager shares quarterly results, and midway through, a director interrupts with a sharp challenge. Are you sure these numbers are even accurate? For many, that sudden confrontation would trigger silence or a defensive flood of explanation. But some respond differently. They use the wave of adrenaline as a cue to ground themselves, deliver a concise acknowledgement, and then present the backup data they've already prepared. What others expected to be a stumble becomes a display of steadiness under pressure. The details of the project almost don't matter. It's the way the conflict itself created the stage for credibility. That's the essence of reframing. The pressure that might have broken composure instead boosts visibility. What matters most is not erasing the tension, but deciding how to use it. If you treat confrontation as a signal to focus, you're less likely to fall into the mental replay loop afterward. Instead of asking yourself, "Why did they say that?" you ask, "What can I do with this burst of energy right now?" That small pivot determines whether the next hours are drained by self-doubt or enhanced by clarity. Those who consistently redirect the surge into action often report that their most effective work happens after heated exchanges, not before them. The energy becomes a productive zone rather than a destructive spiral. You can practice this shift with small, concrete actions. Here are 2 simple techniques anyone can try. Redirect the energy into a 20-minute sprint on one important task. Just tell yourself, "This energy wants to go somewhere, let it go here." Using the surge immediately helps prevent it from turning into replay loops. Do a fast 3-minute brain dump after a tense exchange. Write down everything you'd want to say or argue, then set the page aside. The act of externalizing the thoughts stops them from stealing hours of focus. Micro actions like these seem minor, but they're levers that transform the way conflict affects your day. Instead of carrying it on your shoulders, you channel it into outcomes. Another overlooked benefit of this reframing is how it changes the way people see you. Most colleagues and managers don't just evaluate your skills in calm waters. They pay closer attention when the current is rough. Strong presentations are remembered, but strong handling of interruption or criticism is remembered longer. When others see you channel tension into clarity, it builds a reputation for composure. That reputation can sometimes matter as much as technical excellence when leadership opportunities arise. People remember stability under fire. They trust it. There's also a communicative edge to conflict. In routine situations, you may come across as polished but predictable. Tension, however, strips away the unnecessary. If you meet it with steady voice and straightforward points, your words cut through. That's why moments of disagreement or challenge often have higher recall than neutral contributions. Instead of fearing that kind of attention, you can see it as your best chance to imprint confidence in people's memories. Ironically, the very colleague who wants to discredit you may end up proving your credibility to the room. Of course, reframing does mean you start searching for confrontation or enjoying it. This isn't about liking the discomfort. It's about recognizing the benefit of how your mind and body respond. Think of it like drinking a cup of strong coffee. You may not savor the bitterness, but you value the clarity it brings. In the same way, you don't need to like an interruption or a dismissive remark. You only need to recognize that the energy it sparks can make your focus sharper. That simple perspective shift is enough to prevent hours of lost productivity. The long-term payoff goes beyond saving hours. Over time, every handled moment becomes part of your professional identity. Colleagues start to describe you as someone who doesn't flinch when challenged, who stays clear even when tested, who uses pressure to deliver results. Each confrontation you reframe this way is another building block in that reputation. And reputations, far more than isolated moments, determine how opportunities unfold. If you're thinking, "But conflict makes me tense, I don't want that feeling," the distinction is important. You're not being asked to enjoy it, only to use it. Several resilience studies point out that adaptive strategies like reframing are stronger than simple avoidance or suppression. Avoidance breeds long-term stress. Reframing, by contrast, creates psychological distance and reduces negative emotions, preparing you to re-engage productively. This is why some organizations now view conflict training not as a sideline skill, but as core professional development. It's not optional, it's a productivity driver. So the reframe is less about personality and more about choice. Everyone feels the surge. Some let it turn into self-criticism. Others decide to channel it into output. That decision is what builds resilience, career credibility, and forward motion. Remember the 2 anchors, a quick sprint and a short brain dump. These small practices make the difference between days lost in rumination and days sharpened into growth. Once you start using this secret advantage, the change becomes obvious. What used to derail your day starts fueling it. Comments don't sting as long because you've already converted the energy into progress. Meetings don't loom as threats, but as chances to demonstrate clarity. Even tough dynamics stop feeling like roadblocks because they create the very conditions that highlight your steady presence. That is why the productivity reframe isn't just a mental trick. It's a workplace engine that keeps moving you forward. And while reframing gives you leverage over the long arc of your career, there's still the question of what to do in the heat of the moment. It's one thing to use conflict energy after a meeting. It's another to know how to respond when all eyes are on you and your mind risks going blank. That's the next challenge to solve. Immediate response frameworks that work. When an insult lands and the entire room seems to freeze, it can feel like your mind has just gone blank. For many people, that paralysis, the deer in headlights moment, isn't about not knowing what to say. It's about the sudden surge of adrenaline hijacking your nervous system, locking up words you already know. The solution isn't a perfectly clever comeback. What actually works is having a simple, reliable structure you can fall back on in the moment. One that steadies your body and communicates composure to everyone watching. There are 3 core frameworks that do this consistently: pause plus breathe, curiosity question, and power reframe. Step 1 is pause plus breathe. The exact microscript to rehearse here is, take one slow breath and say nothing for 2 seconds. That's it. It sounds almost too simple, yet in a world where quick reactions are the norm, silence is unexpectedly powerful. Imagine it, someone throws a jab in front of the group. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, you inhale slowly, let yourself exhale, and allow 2 beats of quiet to pass before speaking. Those 2 seconds are not wasted. Conflict mediation and communication research show open questions and pauses lower hostility and increase clarity, precisely because they disrupt escalation patterns. Your colleagues don't perceive your breath as weakness, they read it as steadiness. You are signaling control, not fluster. The silence itself becomes a response that buys your mind space and recalibrates your body, so that whatever you choose to say next comes from poise rather than panic. The next framework is the curiosity question. The short template here is, "That's interesting, what makes you say that?" This approach flips the situation without aggression. Instead of counterattacking or defending yourself, you calmly shift responsibility back to the other person. Take a common scenario. A colleague blurts out, "Do you even check your data?" You could launch into a defensive speech, but instead you deliver the template. Now, instead of you scrambling to justify yourself, the aggressor must explain their remark, often revealing that it was more impulse than fact. Research consistently shows that open-ended questions de-escalate tension and create psychological safety in groups. That means the room now sees you as steady enough to think in the moment, while the jabber is forced onto their back foot. It's subtle but unmistakable. The power dynamic has tilted. The third framework is the power reframe, the short template. I find asking hard questions helps us improve because this is used when someone tries to pin a negative label on you, turning strength into weakness. Imagine hearing, "You're always challenging ideas, it's disruptive." Instead of contesting or retreating, you reframe. I find asking hard questions helps us improve because it surfaces blind spots early. Suddenly, the same criticism has become a professional strength. You haven't raised your voice, you haven't attacked, but you've reshaped the narrative in real time. The audience hears not that you're difficult, but that you value improvement and progress. That tiny pivot changes lingering impressions long after the meeting ends. Together, these 3 frameworks address the freeze in different ways. The pause plus breathe resets your body and prevents you from blurting defensively. The curiosity question moves the spotlight away from you and onto the aggressor. The power reframe transforms an attempted weakness into visible credibility. None of them require cleverness, humor, or split-second improvisation. They require practice, not brilliance. And because they are simple and repeatable, they are available under pressure, the exact moment your default instincts tend to fail you. One of the most overlooked points here is that your audience, the rest of the room, is shaping opinions based not just on the jab, but on your response. If you rush, laugh nervously, or fall into silence, their perception shifts subtly against you. But if you pause, ask, or reframe, the signal is different. You are demonstrating patience, composure, and presence. These are the cues most associated with credibility and leadership potential. That's why mastering these frameworks isn't only about protecting your pride. It's about shaping the way others remember you after the meeting ends. Let's ground this in evidence. Conflict mediation and communication best practices consistently emphasize 2 skills as essential to reducing aggression: the deliberate pause and the open-ended question. Pausing interrupts automatic escalation by disrupting the trigger-response cycle. Open questions shift the discussion away from attack-defense mechanics and toward reflection, lowering hostility and increasing clarity. In leadership training, those who practice these behaviors are evaluated more positively not because they win arguments, but because they show self-control. And in day-to-day workplace interactions, those are exactly the moments colleagues remember. The reason these tools are powerful is also physiological. That initial spike of adrenaline narrows focus and primes your body for quick, instinctive reactions, usually fight, flight, or freeze. Without training, you default to silence or defensiveness. With practice, though, the pause absorbs the surge, the curiosity question redirects it, and the reframe channels it. Each of these gives your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, time to re-engage. That's why such simple actions feel transformative. They let you play a second or two ahead of the rush, instead of being dragged under by it. The next piece is practice. Just like any skill under pressure, these responses work best when they've been rehearsed outside the moment. A daily 30-second exercise can make the difference between freezing and responding. Here's a method. Once a day, picture a common jab you might receive, or recall one from the past. Say each of the 3 scripts out loud once. Take one slow breath and say nothing for 2 seconds. That's interesting. What makes you say that? I find asking hard questions helps us improve because it takes less than a minute, but that rehearsal means your body and voice recognize the phrases when the real test comes. With time, they start to feel automatic, even natural. It's worth noting that these frameworks do not guarantee the aggressor will back down gracefully. They do, however, guarantee that you remain steady, credible, and clear. The aim is not to crush someone or win approval, it's to preserve your energy and project calm authority. Each time you use these responses instead of defaulting to silence or defensiveness, you teach both your colleagues and yourself a new pattern. You don't retreat into paralysis, and you don't escalate needlessly. You hold your space. When people first try these frameworks, the shift they notice most is not what others do, but how they feel afterward. Instead of leaving a meeting replaying words they never said, they leave with clarity, dignity, and energy intact. That difference, hours not lost to rumination, becomes visible across weeks and months. It builds stamina, and it builds consistency in how you show up in front of others. What emerges is a new baseline. You no longer view confrontation as an unpredictable storm you hope to avoid. You start to treat it as a setting where you already know how to stand your ground. That quiet confidence is noticed, even if no one names it directly. It lingers in how people talk about you, and it feeds into whether they see you as a peer contributor or someone ready for bigger responsibilities. The larger opportunity, though, doesn't end with controlling the moment. Once you've proven to yourself that you can navigate these exchanges reliably, the question becomes what happens beyond them. Because the real opportunity isn't just about absorbing blows, it's about what can change in the relationships themselves when you show composure where confrontation once dominated. And that is where the next level of growth begins. Turning aggressors into unexpected allies. The next layer of handling workplace conflict is not about what you say in the meeting. It's about what you choose to do afterward. This is where the most surprising shift happens, turning aggressors into unexpected allies. At first, that might sound unlikely, but conflict isn't always rooted in hostility. More often, it's driven by fear, insecurity, or feeling overlooked. When you combine composure in the moment with a carefully chosen follow-up, you create the conditions for even your sharpest critics to become collaborators. Think about the decision point after a tense exchange. Many people try to forget it, avoid the person, or chalk it up to that's just how they are. But there's another option. Instead of pretending nothing happened, you address it privately with calm curiosity. Conflict resolution research shows this approach often reveals root causes, stress, resource gaps, or insecurity that would never have come out in public. That discovery can reduce repeated attacks and build trust where there was none before. This is where a short technique comes in handy, one you can remember under pressure. Call it the unexpected ally technique. It uses 3 steps. A, ask an open question about the earlier exchange. B, show you value the relationship. And C, suggest a simple next step for collaboration. Picture how this might sound. Earlier you raised a concern in the meeting. I'd like to understand more about what's behind that. I value working well together. and I want to be sure I'm seeing your perspective. Maybe for the next milestone, I'll loop you in during prep so you can weigh in earlier. That exchange takes less than a minute, but it signals confidence and empathy at the same time. You aren't apologizing or minimizing what happened. You are holding your ground while also giving space for their point of view. Most people who lash out aren't trying to ruin you, they are trying to protect themselves. When they see you neither crumble nor escalate, but instead steady yourself and seek understanding, it unsettles their usual pattern. Instead of fueling the cycle, you puncture it. A sharp remark stops being a battle and becomes the start of a different type of conversation. Over time, these private follow-ups tend to reduce the very public conflicts that drain energy and make work feel combative. To organize these kinds of shifts, it helps to have a simple framework. One that's been cited in leadership research is the HBR 3Rs: redirection, reciprocity, rationality. Redirection means steering the aggressive energy away from personal conflict and toward a shared goal. Reciprocity means offering something concrete, a chance for them to contribute or be included, instead of getting stuck in tit-for-tat defensiveness. Rationality means keeping the conversation grounded in facts and professional needs, not emotion or assumption. Taken together, the 3Rs stop the trap of spiraling hostility and give both sides a way to move forward without losing credibility. Composite examples illustrate how this works in practice. A manager notices that a team member constantly interrupts during updates, often with sarcasm. After handling the moment calmly in the meeting, the manager follows up privately. "I've noticed those interruptions, and I'd like to understand where they're coming from. Your perspective matters to me." The employee eventually admits they feel excluded from prep conversations. Instead of pushing back, the manager offers reciprocity, inviting them into pre-meeting calls. The interruptions subside, and over time, that once difficult employee becomes one of the most engaged contributors. What seemed like aggression was rooted in isolation. Another composite case reflects a mediation-style tactic. A project lead dealing with cross-department conflict brings two vocal critics together, not to argue, but to explain their perspectives. By redirecting to shared goals and incorporating open-ended questions, those critics shift from undermining the project to feeling ownership in the solution. What began as opposition becomes alliance. These outcomes aren't outliers. Conflict literature shows that facilitated or private dialogues, when paired with empathy, often reveal fears that drive disruptive behavior. Once those fears surface, relations improve and repeated attacks diminish. Does every aggressor transform into an ally? No. Some resist change no matter what. But even in those cases, you gain credibility. Others in the workplace see how you handle stress. You remain steady, initiate dialogue, and balance empathy with professional boundaries. That consistency builds a reputation of resilience. Reputation works quietly but powerfully. Colleagues start to associate your presence with calm rather than escalation. And when promotion or project opportunities arise, that perception can weigh as heavily as your technical performance. The benefits compound. First, you stop losing hours replaying small conflicts in your mind. Second, you reduce the number of future flare-ups because the aggressor no longer sees you as an easy target. Third, you actually expand your support network, sometimes in the most unexpected places. When someone who once challenged you begins to back your voice in meetings, the entire room notices. It changes the way your ideas land, and it frees up focus for work that moves you forward. This also reshapes the way you feel walking into rooms. Instead of bracing against the critic you dread, you enter expecting collaboration. That psychological shift returns a huge amount of energy. Conflict, instead of being a chronic stressor, becomes a potential signal of where to grow connection. Over time, those shifts change not just how you respond to tension, but how others orient around you. The method does take discipline. It's counterintuitive to approach someone who undermined you and extend dialogue instead of avoidance. But this is precisely why it works. Most people expect either retaliation or retreat. They don't expect calm curiosity, paired with steady boundaries. That surprise, grounded in professionalism, is what creates space for new dynamics to form. It signals that while you won't allow mistreatment, you are also not looking to escalate. In offices where relationships are repeated daily, that kind of signal is transformative. This is why private follow-ups are so powerful. They aren't about rehashing the insult. They are about reframing the entire relationship, empathy without surrender, confidence without aggression, dialogue without performance. The result may not always be friendship, but it can be durable respect. And respect has a way of turning opponents into collaborators when tasks and deadlines stack high. Over the long run, the real productivity gain is not just from the absence of conflict. It's from the presence of unexpected allies, people who once tested you, but now reinforce your credibility. That's career capital built under pressure. And that brings us to the final point. Techniques like the 3Rs and the unexpected ally conversation are impactful because they stabilize relationships. But stability through relationships is only one layer. The other layer is personal. The systems you build that make your composure repeatable, not situational. Because handling conflict once with grace is useful. But what matters more for your career is developing the confidence to do it consistently. Confidence systems that outlast the moment. Real confidence is less about single moments and more about the systems that hold you steady long after the moment passes. This is where daily habits come in, small, repeatable actions that lower anxiety, strengthen resilience, and make confident responses feel automatic. Instead of hoping you'll rise to the occasion with improvisation, you build routines that prepare your body and mind every day. Over time, these routines reduce the frequency and intensity of mental replays, leaving you with more energy to focus where it matters most. The first habit is a microjournal of wins. Every evening or at the end of the workday, take 30 seconds to write down one small victory. It doesn't need to be headline-worthy. Maybe you clarified a detail in a meeting, stood tall while presenting, or simply managed not to snap at someone who was frustrating you. That one line is enough. Over weeks, this journal becomes an undeniable record of progress. When you're tempted to focus on past stumbles, your own written archive reminds you that calm, capable moments are the norm, not the exception. This collection of micro-wins reshapes self-perception in a way a single compliment from a colleague never could. The second habit is 2-minute rehearsals of prepared responses. The idea is to anticipate a few comments that could throw you off balance and practice 3 calm, assertive replies. Examples: yes, I checked the numbers twice before sharing them. Or, I'll keep you updated so we're aligned at each step. Stand in front of a mirror, look yourself in the eye, and repeat each line until it comes out without hesitation. This daily rehearsal works like memory training. When the real test arrives, the words are ready. You're not scrambling for language. You're recalling something you've already made part of your mental script. Athletes practice routines so their body knows what to do before nerves kick in. This is the professional equivalent. The third habit is posture practice. Confidence is as much physical as it is verbal, and colleagues pick up nonverbal cues faster than anything you say. Once a day, set aside 60 seconds to check in. Shoulders back, chest open, eye contact straight, movement steady. Do this standing at your desk, before walking into a meeting, or even as you wait for a video call to connect. Over time, your body learns what confident alignment feels like. In stressful moments, holding posture becomes automatic, feeding back calm signals to your nervous system. The effect is twofold. Your colleagues see steadiness, and you feel it internally. The fourth habit is emotional labeling. The next time you feel triggered, frustrated, anxious, maybe undermined, pause and give that state a precise name. Tell yourself, this is frustration or this is anxiety. It may sound simple, but naming emotions clearly is a research-backed method for reducing their intensity. Vague feelings spiral easily because they lack definition. Clear labeling, on the other hand, creates distance. Once you know, this is irritation, you can respond accordingly instead of letting every emotion blur into overwhelm. The practice turns emotion into data you can act on, rather than noise that controls you invisibly. The fifth habit is the micro reset. After any heated moment, whether a comment irritated you or tension spiked unexpectedly, step away for 2 to 5 minutes. Take a walk, stretch, breathe outside, or jot down what just happened. This pause isn't retreating, it's directing your body through a small reset before the replay can begin. By channeling the physical energy elsewhere, you keep the rest of your day intact. Instead of hours lost to rumination, you shorten recovery to minutes. Over time, this habit protects concentrations across whole work weeks. Individually, these practices may look small, Together, they form a resilient system that changes how confrontation affects you. Journaling builds an archive of capability. Rehearsals ensure you're never caught fully unprepared. Posture strengthens nonverbal presence. Emotional labeling stops spirals before they begin. Micro resets clear the stress from your body quickly. Linked together, they don't erase conflict, but they strip conflict of momentum. Each jab becomes smaller, easier to contain, less threatening to your focus. It's important to keep expectations grounded. These systems won't remove anxiety altogether, they reduce its grip. They lessen the intensity of emotional spikes and cut down how often replays occupy your mind. This aligns with what resilience research shows. Consistent training reduces burnout, improves mental health, and reliably enhances productivity. Organizations that build resilience programs report measurable improvements in well-being, not because conflict stops, but because employees regain tools to keep moving forward. On an individual level, these same daily habits provide similar benefits. One of the quiet advantages of confidence systems is how invisible they are to everyone else. A colleague may think you naturally stand tall when challenged, or assume you're calm under pressure by instinct. What they don't see is you jotting one line in a journal each evening, repeating 3 practiced lines to yourself before bed, or taking 2 minutes to breathe outside after a tense exchange. The visible result is composure. The hidden engine is preparation. That contrast matters, because confidence built through systems is harder to shake precisely because it isn't left to chance. These habits also create compounding returns. A week of journaling feels good. A month builds evidence. A year builds unshakable proof to yourself that you've weathered dozens of challenges with grace. A few rehearsed responses grow into a mindset where all responses are calmer, not just the ones you anticipated. Posture practice seeps beyond meetings, leaving you moving through your day with a different baseline of presence. Emotional labeling helps not only in conflict, but in deadlines, negotiations, even personal stress. What begins as small behavior shifts develops into a wider net of resilience across all contexts where pressure appears. Another overlooked benefit is how these practices raise the baseline of your environment itself. When you consistently respond with dignity and calm, colleagues subconsciously adjust their expectations. Over time, fewer people try to test you. A room that once held frequent jabs may quiet. When someone no longer finds easy targets, the energy to attempt undermining behavior diminishes. In this sense, micro-habits don't just change your reaction, they reshape the broader culture around you. Framing confrontation as a tool instead of a threat becomes much easier with these systems in place. Because you know you have habits to lean on, you stop worrying about whether you'll improvise well in the heat of the moment. That confidence frees up energy for the work itself. Meetings feel less like survival tests and more like places to practice steady presence. Mistakes sting less because they're balanced against a visible archive of progress. The anxiety doesn't vanish, but it stops leading the room. When these habits embed into your routine, conflict no longer interrupts the flow of your day as it once did. Instead of being thrown off course, you reset quickly and return with focus. You waste less time spiraling and spend more time producing. Confidence systems give you the foundation to not only withstand tension, but to return stronger from it. And that sets the stage for something even more valuable: learning how to use the energy of confrontation itself to accelerate progress rather than drain it. Channeling confrontation into productivity fuel. When tension spikes in a meeting, your body isn't just reacting socially, it's reacting biologically. Conflict sets off your fight-or-flight response, pumping adrenaline into your system. That surge sharpens attention and primes you for action. Most people let that energy slip into replay loops where it erodes focus for hours. But the same surge can instead be put to work, turning confrontation into productivity fuel. What matters is whether you direct the energy quickly toward action instead of letting it spiral. Within the first 10 minutes after a clash, 3 simple methods can shift the momentum from drain to output. The first method is capture and clear. This is a quick 3-minute brain dump designed to get the spinning thoughts out of your head and onto a page. Write down what triggered you, the exact words you heard, and the response you wish you'd given. That's it, short and factual, almost like bullet point notes. The act of writing works as a release valve. Instead of replaying the insult mentally, your brain files it into a clear record, giving your nervous system the permission to let go. The second benefit comes later. When you look back at several of these quick notes, you'll see patterns. Maybe the same type of dismissive remark gets under your skin, or the same colleague always tests you. With those insights, you can prepare responses ahead of time, which reduces the chance of freezing in the future. Capture and Clear transforms raw adrenaline into clarity and strategy in minutes. The second method is the sprint task. Here, you take the burst of energy and push it directly into a small, well-defined action that can be completed in under 20 minutes. Your adrenaline wants movement, so give it motion with purpose. Choose one thing, tidy a messy slide so it's presentation ready, send an overdue follow-up email that clears your list, or sketch the first 3 bullet points of your next deliverable. The goal is to translate the agitation into visible progress. Each task acts as both an outlet for the pressure and a gain in productivity that others can actually see. And because these are short pushes, you don't need to tackle something huge. You just convert what could have been rumination into a finished item that moves your day forward. Over time, repeating sprint tasks after moments of conflict builds a reliable association. Confrontation equals completion, not collapse. The third method is the micro-break reset. Sometimes the energy runs too hot to be poured immediately into work. In that case, the most productive action isn't work at all. It's a deliberate short reset. Step outside for a 2-minute walk, do a round of slow, focused breathing, or write down 3 priorities to shift your attention forward. The key is to keep it intentional and short, 2 to 5 minutes, not 20. These actions calm the system enough that the surplus energy loses its edge, leaving you refreshed rather than depleted. By resetting quickly, you prevent the spiral of replays and get back to tasks with sharper focus than if you had tried to plow through while unfocused. It may look like a pause, but it is actually a conversion moment where you reclaim stability before your mind takes the hit deeper. All 3 of these methods, capture and clear, sprint task, and micro-break reset, work because they redirect the biological spike that follows any heated exchange. The body floods with adrenaline, and unless given a channel, that fuel burns itself out in unproductive ways. By intercepting it in the first 10 minutes, you transform an otherwise draining encounter into the trigger for output, clarity, and stability. The physiological state is the same. The outcome depends on what you do with it. This is not about denying the sting. It's about choosing structure over rumination. The payoff is visible in both performance and reputation. If conflict usually left you distracted for hours, these redirections recover most of that time. That's dozens of hours each month restored. Colleagues also form subtle impressions. They notice not just whether you were jabbed, but what you did after. If they see you sulk or withdraw, that impression lingers. If they see you return with sharper slides, clearer updates, or steady focus, a different impression forms. That tension makes you stronger, not weaker. That impression, repeated over weeks, adds to your professional credibility. People remember who stays on course regardless of pressure. The practice takes discipline at first. A heated moment tempts you to stew in the sting or to try and suppress it entirely. But if you've preloaded simple steps, 3 minutes of notes, 1 sprint task, or a 2-minute walk, the decision is lighter. You don't have to invent what to do on the spot. You just follow a quick system that catches the energy before it turns against you. Over time, you'll find that the recovery doesn't just repair focus, it builds readiness. You start to walk into meetings knowing that even if someone tries to undercut you, you will leave sharper than when you walked in. That changes your posture, tone, and presence in ways others notice. There's also a cumulative advantage. Each time you redirect the surge, you erase fewer hours in replay and stack more hours into meaningful action. That doesn't just improve daily productivity, it creates a cycle where conflict is no longer a source of dread. You know the system will catch you, so you stop fearing the next exchange. That shift in outlook alone frees up mental space you can channel toward higher value work. When your calendar fills with progress instead of hidden drains, momentum accelerates. But what happens if you do all this and the same people keep returning with the same jabs? What if redirecting your own energy isn't enough because the provocations don't stop? This is where the focus expands beyond individual recovery. Conflict management isn't only about surviving each encounter. It's also about shaping your environment so you don't face the same drain repeatedly. And that requires a step beyond channeling your energy toward productivity. Understanding why some colleagues keep targeting the same people and what consistent boundaries can do to change those patterns. Preventing repeat conflicts. Preventing repeated conflicts starts with recognizing that single responses, while powerful in the moment, aren't enough to stop the pattern from returning. If the dynamics around you stay the same, unclear boundaries, weak systems, or silence from leadership, aggressors often circle back. They test until they meet limits. Breaking the cycle requires both personal boundaries and organizational practices that send the message: this behavior will not repeat unchecked. At an individual level, the strongest approach combines calm assertiveness with consistency. Aggression thrives on finding easy targets, those who collapse into silence or defensiveness. Research into workplace dynamics shows that people who occasionally assert themselves receive 37% fewer negative comments over time compared to those who always stay quiet. Standing your ground doesn't need to mean escalating. It means responding with steady, measured language that communicates boundaries without anger. Over time, colleagues learn that their attempts to unsettle you no longer pay off. That shift gradually reduces recurring incidents, not because the aggressor suddenly becomes considerate, but because the environment teaches them that targeting you is unproductive. But individual boundary setting is only part of the equation. Patterns continue when organizations lack structure. Studies show that companies without formal reporting or violence prevention protocols are up to 5 times more likely to experience repeated aggression within a 12-month window. When no process exists to capture early misconduct, the aggressor infers a kind of permission. Silence from the system implies tolerance. Compare that to environments that encourage anonymous reporting with clear follow-up. According to Gallup, organizations that offer anonymous reporting options and peer support programs see a 62% improvement in early interventions. Employees speak up earlier, management addresses concerns sooner, and conflicts are resolved before they can recur. Underreporting is common. Some research indicates that most incidents go unreported, which makes early, anonymous channels critical for building trust and preventing escalation. The first organizational best practice that prevents repeats is establishing clear reporting channels, including anonymous options. Here, the exact phrasing recommended: clear reporting channels and anonymous options. Provide every employee with at least one clear reporting pathway for aggressive behavior, including an anonymous option. Anonymous channels increase reporting significantly and make early intervention far more likely. This move helps counter underreporting, which erodes trust and allows patterns to harden. The second best practice is regular training paired with early intervention. De-escalation training equips employees with tools to contain hostility before it grows, while conflict prevention programs demonstrate a collective commitment to respect. Research shows workplaces that introduce formal prevention programs reduce incidents by up to 79% within the first year. Here's the exact phrasing you can use: regular training and early intervention. Offer routine de-escalation training and conflict prevention sessions, then follow up on early reports quickly. Prevention programs can reduce incident rates by as much as 79% within a year. Investing here doesn't just calm workplace dynamics, it protects daily productivity by addressing conflict before it consumes teams. The third best practice is leadership modeling paired with swift follow-up. Leaders set tone by how they react in the first 24 hours after an incident. If they ignore or delay, trust collapses. If they intervene transparently, employees recover faster and aggressors get the message. Research shows organizations that respond promptly with open communication regain employee confidence 3 times faster than those that stay quiet. Use this phrasing: leadership modeling and swift follow-up. Leaders should model steady, respectful behavior under pressure and respond visibly to incidents within 24 hours. Transparent follow-up restores trust quickly and reduces repeat behaviors. Together, these practices form the organizational layer of prevention. Reporting channels capture early signs. Training builds capacity for resilience. Leadership modeling sets expectations. Without all three, the same conflicts return until morale suffers and productivity drains. With them, employees know that aggression has boundaries and that consistent structures will support them. For managers listening, practical action matters more than abstract intent. Here's a simple micro-commitment. If you're a team lead, implement one clear reporting channel this month and schedule one conflict prevention session for your team. That one decision signals seriousness and creates visible structure against repeating behaviors. Employees don't just hear, "We support you," they see it in action. On the peer level, prevention often comes down to collective standards. Aggressors look for isolation. If they think targeting one colleague won't cause blowback, they keep pushing. But when team members practice peer support, acknowledging boundary-setting responses publicly or redirecting conversations gently when someone crosses a line, the aggressor notices the lack of social reward. Over time, they adjust, not because they were convinced in one dramatic moment, but because the room trained them out of it. Research into cycle-breaking leadership emphasizes this exact principle. Collective accountability changes behavior faster than individual pushback alone. Another element in prevention is environmental reinforcement. Many organizations now use safety nets like peer support groups, anonymous surveys, or confidential reporting platforms, not just as compliance tools, but as preventive culture-building tools. These structures communicate that no single incident vanishes into silence. Employees can bring concerns forward without fear, and systems will handle them systematically. The result is both practical, fewer recurring conflicts, and cultural, a stronger baseline of respect. Support after incidents also plays a major role in breaking cycles. When aggression is left untreated, employees often carry anxiety into future interactions, making them more vulnerable to being re-traumatized by similar behavior. Organizations that provide psychological counseling or trauma support after incidents see a 65% improvement in employee retention for affected teams. That means people feel safer staying and re-engaging, instead of withdrawing or leaving. Post-incident care isn't just about healing, it's prevention for the future. By closing the loop fully, organizations reduce the triggers that keep repeating dynamics alive. From a productivity standpoint, each repeated conflict comes at a hidden cost. Employees lose focus not only in the heat of the moment, but in the anticipation of it happening again. A sarcastic remark or public dismissiveness may take seconds to occur, but if it becomes recurring, workers begin to adjust routines, to avoid meetings, to pull back on contributions, or to disengage from projects where aggression feels likely. The cost is cumulative. Preventing repeats isn't about perfection. It's about preserving bandwidth so work doesn't get overshadowed by predictable interruptions. The broader lesson is this: patterns of aggression only survive when they go unchecked. When individuals hold firm boundaries calmly, when organizations create trusted channels for reporting, when managers model early, steady intervention, conflict begins to lose oxygen. Each time boundaries and systems hold, recurrence becomes less attractive to the aggressor. And each time recurrence decreases, productivity is shielded for both the individual and the wider team. Preventing repeat conflicts is ultimately about engineering predictability on the right side of the equation. Employees know their voices will be heard, know that support will follow, and know that aggression won't be left unchecked. That level of predictability reduces anxiety and prevents the mental energy drain that repeats often cause. It restores clarity, letting everyone focus on what they're there for, producing strong work. The benefit isn't abstract. It shows up as smoother meetings, lower repetition of the same workplace arguments, and less wasted time on issues that should have been closed weeks earlier. For an individual, the payoff is visible focus and renewed momentum. For a manager, the payoff is healthier teams that spend less energy shielding themselves from preventable challenges. And there's a further outcome. Once repeat conflicts diminish, the impact expands into how others perceive you, not only as someone who manages stress, but as someone who helps create environments where others can thrive. That perception begins to connect to larger opportunities, because day-to-day productivity feeds into how colleagues and leaders judge your capability to handle higher responsibility. Which brings us to the next step: understanding how the way you manage conflict doesn't just protect your focus, it can shape the trajectory of your career. Career impact, productivity, and promotions. Career momentum is rarely decided by raw talent alone. It often hinges on the way you're perceived when pressure is high and conflict surfaces. Those visible reactions, whether you study the room or add to its tension, directly influence how colleagues and leaders think about your future role. This is the connection between day-to-day composure and long-term opportunity. The way you manage confrontation shapes both productivity in the present and credibility for promotions down the line. Research continues to support this link. A 2025 study highlighted that employees who navigate difficult interactions with calm and clarity are often rated by their managers as more influential leaders. That perception matters because influence is a leadership currency. Managers lean on those who appear steady when others are unsettled. In practical terms, this trait is valued as highly as technical performance. Another 2025 report found that companies offering resilience and conflict training saw burnout decrease by about 30% and turnover reduce by around 25%. Those programs not only protected employees from fatigue, but also gave managers clearer pathways to identify talent ready for more responsibility. When people handle friction professionally, it stabilizes the team. When they destabilize it, opportunities narrow. Consider a composite example drawn from several real workplace scenarios. A mid-level employee in a project review faces sharp criticism from a colleague. The room grows quiet, everyone watches for a reaction. In one version, the employee grows defensive, speaks too quickly, and the project discussion dissolves into tension. In the other version, the same employee takes a beat, asks a clarifying question, and explains their reasoning with steady language. The difference in outcome is noticeable. In the first case, the meeting drags and credibility shrinks. In the second, the room sees not only composure, but also resourcefulness under pressure. Afterwards, that employee is remembered by leadership as someone who can hold the floor in difficult conditions. It doesn't guarantee a promotion, but it tilts the perception strongly in their favor. These moments accumulate and shape reputations. Managers often ask themselves, who in this group can lead a room when disagreement breaks out? The answer isn't always the highest performer on paper. It's often the person whose demeanor reduces friction and keeps projects moving. Resilient employees not only protect their own productivity, but also influence the tone of their teams. Studies have found that people with higher resilience are, on average, 35% more productive than peers and have spillover effects. Meetings stay more focused, colleagues mimic steadiness, and emotional tone stabilizes. Those indirect benefits matter. They show managers not just that you can handle your own tasks, but that you make others' tasks easier. That multiplier effect is one of the clearest signals of leadership readiness. In practice, building this signal doesn't require flawless speeches or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it comes down to one micro-action at the right time. A simple, effective pattern is: address the conflict calmly in the moment, and then follow up privately within 24 hours. The calm-in-the-moment response shows you can steady the group under pressure, while the private follow-up signals that you value relationships enough to resolve tension constructively. Executing this combination consistently creates an impression of balance, confidence without hostility, professionalism without avoidance. Leaders value this balance because it reduces ongoing friction while preserving forward momentum. There are also broader organizational factors that reinforce this dynamic. When companies provide structured resilience and conflict training, the benefits appear quickly. With burnout dropping by nearly a third and turnover reduced by a quarter, teams become more stable. In that environment, employees who demonstrate conflict competence stand out even more. They are not just personally resilient, they are participants in creating a healthier workplace. Managers often remember those individuals most clearly, because they are the ones making leadership easier by preventing the kinds of spirals that cause attrition. In other words, composure under conflict not only benefits your own trajectory, but also positions you as a contributor to organizational stability, a highly visible leadership trait. Equally important is how you handle criticism. Many professionals avoid it, fearing that pushback undermines their authority. But research shows that those who use criticism constructively, rather than as a personal wound, see measurable improvements in performance and trust. When you extract value from hard feedback without slipping into defensiveness, you show leaders you can integrate difficult information. a core skill for anyone tasked with overseeing teams. This practice builds upward trust with managers and horizontal trust with peers. Over time, that trust becomes a currency exchanged in rooms where advancement is decided. The ripple effect of all this cannot be understated. After tense meetings, people talk less about the technical details and more about how the conflict was handled. Stories spread informally. She stayed composed even when challenged, or he handled that pushback without losing focus. These comments reinforce reputations that extend beyond the meeting itself. They travel into decision-making settings where leaders weigh not just output but also presence. Often, those impressions tip the balance when teams consider who can be trusted with expanded responsibility. On the other hand, avoidance carries its own career tax. Employees who consistently shrink back during conflict may be perceived as agreeable but not authoritative. Over time, hesitation becomes a label, someone technically reliable but not prepared to lead. This doesn't mean you need to relish confrontation. It means that retreating too often signals to others that you do not want the responsibilities that include managing tension. The long-term cost is subtle but real. Fewer invitations to visible projects, fewer opportunities to demonstrate leadership readiness. The equation that emerges is simple but far-reaching. By staying composed, channeling conflict energy into productivity, and following up with calm professionalism, you send clear signals about your ability to lead. Organizations notice and respond, not with guaranteed promotions, but with increased consideration when leadership roles open. Conflict becomes not just something to withstand, but a stage to demonstrate traits managers actively seek: steadiness, resilience, and credibility. Seen through this lens, managing confrontation shifts from being a short-term survival tactic to being a defining feature of professional growth. It accelerates productivity in the present, but more importantly, it marks you as a candidate for trust in the future. That dual benefit, stronger output plus visible leadership traits, is what places you ahead when advancement decisions are made. And it sets the stage for a larger realization about conflict's role in your career growth, one that changes the way you measure every difficult interaction that lies ahead. Conflict at work isn't just about surviving tense moments, it's about using them to signal strength, focus, and resilience. Each exchange is a choice point. Either you give away energy or you turn it into momentum. Leaders and colleagues notice who steadies themselves when pressure rises, and those impressions shape long-term opportunities just as much as daily output. Your takeaway is simple and practical. Pause, ask, reframe. These 3 actions are enough to turn stress into strength the next time pressure surfaces. Now I'd like to hear from you. Drop a comment sharing which tactic you'll try first, and subscribe for more practical tools to sharpen your productivity. Remember the mantra: pause, ask, reframe.